The slap echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Every fork froze midair. A man in an expensive suit stood over a quiet veteran holding a sleeping toddler, his hand still raised, his face twisted with rage. The veteran's cheek was bright red, but he didn't move. He just held his daughter closer, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the table. And that's when the man in the suit noticed it. A small tattoo on the veteran's forearm. His face went pale. His hand began to shake. Because he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love it if you join our Sage Stories family by hitting that subscribe button. Give this video a like if stories about kindness and courage touch your heart, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let me tell you how we got to this moment. Marcus Webb had been sitting in the corner booth of Rosie's diner for exactly 12 minutes. He knew because he'd been checking his watch every 30 seconds, hoping his daughter Emma would stay asleep just a little longer. The 3-year-old was curled against his chest, her tiny fingers clutching his shirt, her breath warm and steady against his neck. This was their routine now. Tuesday mornings at Rosie's. Scrambled eggs for him, chocolate chip pancakes for her when she woke up. It was one of the few constants in their life since her mother had passed away 18 months ago. Marcus was 34 but felt twice that age some days. His dark hair was starting to show gray at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened from sleepless nights and endless worry. He'd left the military 3 years earlier, trading combat boots for construction boots, trying to build a normal life for Emma. The transition hadn't been easy. The nightmares still came. The hypervigilance never quite left. But Emma was his anchor. Her laugh, her questions, her absolute trust in him. She made everything worth it. The diner was busy that morning. Rosie herself was working the counter, her silver hair pulled back in her usual bun, her warm smile greeting every customer like family. The smell of fresh coffee and frying bacon filled the air. Conversations hummed around him. Marcus had just closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the peace, when the bell above the door chimed. The man who walked in commanded attention without saying a word. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. His name was Derek Thornton, though Marcus didn't know that yet. What Marcus did notice was the way the man's eyes swept the crowded diner with irritation, the way he snapped his fingers at Rosie when she asked him to wait for a table. 10 minutes later, Derek was seated at the booth directly behind Marcus, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice loud and sharp. Marcus tried to tune it out, gently rocking Emma when she stirred slightly. But Derek's words cut through everything. I don't care what excuses they have. Fire them. All of them. I want it done today. These people are replaceable. They should be grateful they even have jobs. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He'd heard men like this before. Men who measured worth in dollar signs and treated people like commodities. He told himself to let it go. Not his business. Not his fight. But then Emma shifted, and Derek's voice rose even louder, making her whimper. Can you keep that kid quiet? Derek snapped, turning to glare at Marcus. Some of us are trying to conduct business here. Marcus met his eyes calmly. She's sleeping. I'm keeping her as quiet as possible. Well, it's not quiet enough. This is a public place, not a daycare. Control your kid or leave. The diner had gone quiet. Rosie started walking over, her face concerned, but Marcus raised a hand slightly, signaling he had it handled. I'm not causing any trouble, he said evenly. My daughter and I are just having breakfast. Derek's face flushed red. He stood up, his 6'2" frame towering over the booth. Do you know who I am? I own 3 dealerships in this county. I employ half this town. When I tell you to do something, you do it. Marcus adjusted Emma carefully, making sure she was secure against his shoulder. His voice stayed calm, almost gentle. I'm sure you're very important. But right now, I'm just a dad trying to have breakfast with his daughter. We're not hurting anyone. That's when it happened. Derek's hand shot out, striking Marcus across the face with a sharp crack that made everyone gasp. Emma woke up crying. Marcus's cheek blazed red, but he didn't retaliate. He just held his sobbing daughter, whispering soothing words into her hair, his whole body trembling with restraint. And that's when Derek saw it. As Marcus shifted to comfort Emma, his sleeve pulled back, revealing a small tattoo on his inner forearm. A skull with a dagger through it, surrounded by 3 lightning bolts. Derek had a brother in the army. He knew exactly what that symbol meant. Delta Force. The most elite operators in the United States military. The men who did things that never made the news. The warriors who could end threats with terrifying efficiency. Derek's arrogance evaporated in an instant. He stumbled backward, his face going from red to white in seconds. Because he had just assaulted a man who'd spent years in the most dangerous places on Earth. A man who'd shown incredible restraint by not breaking him in half. A man who was choosing peace even when he'd been attacked. Rosie reached the table, her face hard as steel. That's it. You're done here. Get out of my diner. But before Derek could move, an older man stood up from a nearby table. He was in his 70s, with white hair and a weathered face. Son, he said quietly, looking at Derek, I've been watching you since you walked in here. I watched you snap at Rosie, the woman who's fed half this town for 40 years. I watched you yell about firing people like their lives mean nothing. And now I watched you hit a man holding his child. He walked closer, and Marcus noticed the small pin on his jacket. Vietnam veteran. That man you just slapped. He didn't hit you back. Not because he can't. But because he's holding his daughter. Because he's better than you. And because men like him fight so that men like you can sit in your office and think you're important. Other veterans in the diner began to stand. 5 of them. Then 7. They formed a quiet circle around Marcus's booth, not threatening, just present. Protecting. The way brothers do. Derek grabbed his jacket and practically ran for the door, his hands shaking, his expensive shoes slipping on the tile floor. He never came back to Rosie's diner. Marcus finally looked up, Emma still crying softly against his shoulder. The older veteran smiled gently. Thank you for your service, son. What unit? First SFODD, Marcus said quietly. The man nodded with understanding and respect. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled out his wallet and handed Rosie a $50 bill. This covers their breakfast. And get that little girl the biggest stack of pancakes you have. One by one, the other veterans came over. Not to make a fuss. Not to ask questions. Just to shake Marcus's hand. To ruffle Emma's hair as she calmed down. To remind him that he wasn't alone. One of them owned a construction company and handed Marcus a business card, telling him they were always looking for good men. Another invited him to the weekly veterans breakfast they held on Saturdays. By the time Emma was munching on her chocolate chip pancakes, her tears forgotten, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Connection. Community. The knowledge that even in his darkest moments, there were people who understood. Who had his back. Who saw him not for what he could do, but for who he was. Rosie refilled his coffee and squeezed his shoulder. You're a good man, Marcus. And you're raising a good girl there. Don't let people like him make you doubt that. Marcus had trained for years to be a warrior. He'd learned 1,000 ways to neutralize threats, to protect the innocent, to complete impossible missions. But sitting in that diner, surrounded by strangers who'd become brothers in an instant, holding his daughter safe in his arms, he learned something new. True strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how much you can endure with grace. It's about protecting what matters most, even when it costs you. It's about choosing kindness when violence would be easier. That morning taught everyone in Rosie's diner something profound. It taught them that real power isn't about money or status or raising your voice. Real power is in restraint, in compassion, in standing up for what's right even when you're sitting down. Derek Thornton walked into that diner thinking he owned the room. Marcus Webb sat there quietly and showed everyone what true leadership looks like. The veterans who stood up that day didn't just protect Marcus. They reminded all of us that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. That the person struggling next to us might be carrying burdens we can't see. That kindness costs us nothing but means everything. That sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply be there for someone who needs it. Marcus still takes Emma to Rosie's diner every Tuesday morning. And he's never alone. Because that's what happens when you lead with dignity instead of ego. When you choose peace over pride. When you remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Kindness creates ripples that spread farther than we'll ever know. So today, I'm asking you to be that ripple. Stand up for someone who needs it. Offer grace when others offer judgment. Choose compassion over confrontation. And share your own stories of kindness in the comments below. Because the world needs more people like Marcus. More people like those veterans. More moments like the one that changed everything in a small diner on a Tuesday morning.